Splice has over 12 years of experience in the mobile field, working with international telecoms companies like TELUS, Rogers, and Apple. Keron is the owner of Droid Island. The company's mission is to help bridge the gap in mobile technology and the Caribbean consumer. The Keron Rose brand is all about helping Caribbean entrepreneurs build their digital assets. Keron spends his time educating the Caribbean on smartphone tech through his Droid Island brand and also educating entrepreneurs on how to build their online businesses. All right, so I am very excited about our interview today because I feel like, what is that laugh about?
It's my laugh.
I feel like it's like an evil, like Austin Powers, like an evil genius laugh. But I like the fact that you're having so much fun and we haven't even started yet.
Of course.
That's how you live your life.
That's how I live my life.
So to get us started today, I'm actually just going to ask a little bit about you, the person, because I feel like you share a lot of business stuff on your platforms, a lot of tech stuff. But I actually wanted to know more about Keron, like who is Keron Rose, a little bit of intro about you, and then get into the technical stuff, right? Yeah. So just, I know you were in Canada, but were you born here? Did you move to Canada at a particular point? And how did you arrive back here?
So I was born here, right? I lived here for 2 weeks.
So you're not even a Trini then? You're not even a Trini?
Listen, I'm a full-blown Trini. So we left like after 2 weeks of me being here, and I was in Canada for 28 years. Right. And then for me, I just got to a point where I was feeling like I needed a change. I was feeling stuck, and I was thinking of either moving out to Alberta. I had a lot of my friends move out there to go work in the oil fields and work with the oil companies. But there was something about minus 50-degree weather and 14-day work days that just wasn't
appealing.
It just wasn't appealing. Yeah?
I wonder why.
It just wasn't appealing.
I mean, it sounds
treacherous.
Sounds peachy. Sounds peachy keen. I'm not sure why. You wouldn't jump at the opportunity.
The money is good, but I'm not willing to do that.
I wonder why the money is so good.
Well, that is it, right?
Because nobody wants to go there.
Yeah, and then it's a cheaper cost of living out there than it is in Toronto. Right. So because I'm born here and I'm a dual citizen, I was like, you know what? Since about 2009. I probably messaged my aunt and my grandmother like every year, hey, I want to come move to Trinidad from about 2009. And then it wasn't until 2013 I actually pulled the trigger. So when I moved out here, it was kind of easy because again, I'm a dual citizen. So it was just about to get my IDs and then I figure out myself and what I wanted to do. But
had you visited Trinidad anytime in between there?
Yeah. So I was usually here every year or every other year. So since I was growing up, I was always back and forth with coming to Trinidad.
Okay, so it's like carnival time, like Christmas time, like
never. I only actually before I moved here, the only time I came for carnival was 2011. Every time before that was just any time throughout the year. Okay. So I never came for carnival. What always drew me to Trinidad was the feeling of whenever we touched down in Trinidad, I always felt like home. I always felt like I was at home. When I was in Toronto, it always felt like I was visiting. Yeah. Even from when I was a kid. I remember coming up in even when we were coming and it was the old airport where they used to wheel the stairs up and the doors would open. And that warmth hit you. I lived for that warmth. And so when Caribbean Airlines changed their slogan to the warmth of the Caribbean, I was like, damn, they nailed it right on the head. So coming back to Trinidad, the majority of my family is here. It was always good because when you're growing up in a foreign country, your family's not there. Yeah. So we had, an aunt, a couple cousins, but that was it. So Trinidad was always home.
That's really interesting. Even though, physically, because, somebody listening on, it would be very different. And like, I'm sure you'd appreciate that as well if you were
Yeah.
physically in the space and somebody would be like, but how could you have left? But you still feel it in your bones, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I find it so interesting because I've been reading a lot recently about, you know, like genetic memory and how you carry like memories from like your five
From when you're
generations. No, but you carry genetic memory from like 5 generations before you in your system, in your DNA. I mean, I read that. I don't know how accurate it is, but I've just been thinking about that a lot now. So it's almost like, you know, you have these sensations and these things that you feel drawn to, even though you might not have experienced it in your lifetime, but there's just some memory in there that you feel, you know what I mean? And I find that so interesting. So you were just feeling for a change in your life, you wanted to make a switch up. So in terms of professionally, what were you doing before you made the transition?
In Canada or here?
Yeah, in Canada. Before you came back, what was your work life like?
I had worked in the telecommunications industry since I was 19 years old. I worked at Apple for a couple of years. I worked in insurance. I had bounced around. I was always within the corporate space, but I was still, like, when you're in Canada, where again, cost of living is so high, you're not so much thinking about what you want to do, you're thinking about what you have to do. Whatever is paying the most money, whatever your skill set is, because even if you get a degree, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get into the field that you went and studied in, right? So, but I always had a corporate job, and I just bounced between industries. But I've always predominantly worked within telecommunications and the smartphone industry and the technology industry.
Okay, you always had an interest in tech.
Yeah.
Okay, so what your story is a little interesting to. John, who I interviewed as well, I'm not sure if you know him, John Ruman. Yeah. So I interviewed him as well, and there's a little similarity there in that he also moved to, which was like a big change for him because he was living in New York State, not city. That's just what he was very clear about. And then he moved here, and then he had to kind of really do a deep dive in terms of what is he going to do professionally to sustain himself. So I'm wondering, when you did the transition, is it something where you had like a really solid map before you came of what you're going to do, or you came and you're just like,
I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like,
yeah, I'm here.
I've been in Canada. That is intense.
Yeah.
I've been working. I can figure something out.
Listen, when I came, I just wanted peace of mind.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing for me. When I moved, it was like the end of October. I spent like a month in Jamaica in December for my birthday in 2013, and I just wanted that peace of mind. I didn't come with any real plan as to what I could do. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions I had that I had to get rid of very quickly was life here was like in Canada in terms of the mindset of the people. When I got my first job here in 2014, I realized that there is a culture difference. There is a difference in the way people think. There's a difference in the way people do business. The things that would work back in Toronto don't work exact here. You have to be creative enough to look at the lessons you've learned or look at how things are happening over there and then figuring out how do you tweak it here to get through to the culture and the people here. And I learned that very quickly, and it took a while to learn that, so that when I decided to start my own business and whatnot, I was better prepared. But if I had just tried to start a business when I just moved here, I would have failed miserably.
What are like 3 of the things that you would say are, speaking to that cultural difference that you notice, what are like 3 of the big differences that you would say in terms of Canada versus here?
One of the key things here is that we're not quick to trust. We're not quick to trust. You have to work for the trust. I feel like we don't put forth enough information to educate the masses. The companies, the institutions hold a lot of information back. That's why there's so much misinformation.
Right, so that's kind of To me, it kind of seems like it's kind of tied into the trust thing, like it's a little bit less open.
Yes.
Like it's a little bit less
Yes.
open.
Yes.
And more closed.
Yes. So it's hard to navigate just getting things done. If you want to get your passport done, ask 5 people within the institution, you're going to get 5 different answers, right? And it really just depends on who you're dealing with at that point in time and what their mood is like in order for you to get through. And then the other thing is that we're technologically behind,
Right.
but that works in our favor, where we can kind of look at what's happening in other places and kind of see where things are happening, so that when we are here and it comes here, you're a bit better equipped. The problem to that is when things launch in the States or in Canada and you're getting like 1.0 of a product, by the time it comes here, we're getting like the 10th iteration of it, and that transition hits you hard and fast, so people don't necessarily know what to do. Right. And because people are not educating you on the technology or whatever you're using, it makes it even harder for people to adapt. So add in the lack of trust, the lack of information, and things moving at record speeds in Trinidad, it's a bit of a disaster. But
yeah, it's kind of like the entire world is moving at this speed, and there's a lot of connectivity in the rest of the world, and it's kind of like we're in a cocoon that's kind of like separated from the whole rest of the planet, and it's very strange.
And for good and for bad, because there's a lot of things that are kept here that I'm like, we don't have in Toronto.
Yeah.
Like just the simple fact that you don't walk past anybody in the street without saying a good morning, even if you don't know them. If you say a good morning to anybody in Toronto and you don't know them, they're quick to give you that screw face. Like, who are you talking to, right? So there's still a much more of a homely vibe being in the Caribbean than when you're over there.
Right. So
Toronto.
everywhere has its kind of pros and cons, and you kind of have to navigate.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the business stuff, which is what I know you're becoming really known for online. Mm-hmm. But again, talking about you and your experiences, and one of the things that I like about you in terms of your voice and how you speak and relate is I think that you're a very practical person in the sense that it's not just these cliched motivational slogans, but it's like, if you need to build a website, here's what you need to do. You need to go to this URL, you need to put in this email address, you need to click this button, and that's going to take you from point A to point B. Point B is a beautiful place, but how do you get there? So I feel like you're very practical, and I appreciate that. You know, everybody has their own voice. So, you know, so a lot of my question is really in tune with that energy that you have. But in terms of that practicality and that realness, what I wanted to ask you is about that entrepreneurship, and you've started your own business here on your own platforms. What are some of the challenges that you faced, and how have you dealt with those challenges? Because as my first interviewee said earlier this morning is, she was just trying to bring some balance to the entrepreneurship conversation where, you know, it's a lot of, to use a young phrase, I would say, gassing up. Like, like live your dream, like entrepreneurship, everybody, yes, all of that. But I think, which is not bad, but I think she was trying to bring some balance and round out the discussion with, it's not just going to fall in your lap, or it's not just going to magically, if you dream it today, tomorrow you're going to have $1 million. You know, there's a little bit more depth and dimension to it. So I'm interested in finding out from you and giving us that real perspective of, you know, what are some things that have really challenged you in your entrepreneurship, or, you know, like moments that have been really frustrating, and how have you come through?
I think the step one is the hardest part, which is self-introspection. We're in a time period now where you can make a business and you can make a living off the things that you are interested in, right? The old ways of making money are dying, and some have died. And you have to constantly figure out, well, what are the new ways that people are making money and building a business now through the digital age? And when you can literally do anything because you have the tools available, what do? And the compass for me was that self-introspection and figuring out what I liked, what do I want to do. And that took a while because right before I moved to Trinidad, I was apprenticing to be a dog trainer because I wanted to actually be the person that trained dogs that worked in narcotics, that worked with the police, that worked with the military because I love dogs, right? When I moved here, dog training wasn't really a big thing. Like they're not, like a lot of the security firms are not really focused on training dogs like how they are in Canada, right? And then I remember doing a course in the bamboo on tilapia farming because I'm like, you know what, I gotta do something, right? Let me, you know, and I had it in my head, like, you know, I'm gonna
dog trainer, no.
Yeah.
Tilapia farming.
Yeah, you know.
Possibly.
So you're doing things to kind of figure out, you know, what you like. And I remember it really hit me where, you know, there was a reason why I've always worked within telecoms or technology because I remember growing up being the neighborhood tech guy. Everybody would come to me and be like, hey, I bought a new sound system. Can you come over and set it up? I bought a new Ethernet card to plug in my internet or whatever. Can you come and put it in the computer? And that always fascinated me from a very young age. And same thing with technology, working in telecoms. I loved working with the phones, not because of just that you're working with cool phones. I loved the fact that you're working with a variety of people from CEOs of company right down to the everyday person, but your goal is to match this technology, make people understand it, and help the technology enrich your life. So when I came to Trinidad, I spent some time, worked in 2 jobs, and I realized what I liked was, and what was a problem. I figured out a problem that was in something that I enjoyed doing, and I meshed it. So it happened for me with going into B-Mobile and Digicel stores and listening to the sales reps talk utter nonsense about the technology. Like, and it was amazing to me because I'm like, yo, like this is the type of stuff that gets you fired on the spot. Because when you think about it, like I remember at the Apple store, like you have, you know, executives coming in and they're buying an entire studio worth of equipment from the Macs to the iPads to the phones because everything works in unison and they want to speak to specialists to help them make that decision. And when people are coming into the stores here, you can't even find out if the phone is waterproof or not because they're just giving you absolute, and it wasn't just one, it was like almost all the stores. And then I'm like, yo, why is there so much misinformation on such a serious niche like mobile? We all have a smartphone. We're all using it for a variety of reasons. And that is how Droid Island started. I just started to blog about a lot of the issues, and I just started to focus on teaching people how to use the technology better. So there was a very big problem. There was a problem in a space that I enjoy, and I wanted to do something about it. And so I think that when you are thinking about starting a business, you have to sit down and really think about, you know, what are you happy about, or what pisses you off to a point that you want to do something about it. And then when you can do that self-introspection, then you can start to say, okay, all right, cool. I like flowers, you know what? I don't think that, maybe flowers, you know, help me through therapy, and I like gardening. And maybe people, you know, maybe I want to help people with therapy or helping them get through something by the use of gardening because it's helped me. And you go from there.
Yeah, I think I like that you spoke to that because even for me, I find it's kind of a maturation process in terms of how you're looking at business because, and I would say for me as well, because you start off when there's not everybody, when I say you, not everyone, but I'm saying from my own experience, there's kind of like this high and this pie in the sky and this kind of dream. Oh, if I did this thing, I would be so happy every day and it would be so magical. And yeah, like I could just do my dream and every day would be just like dancing on rainbows and unicorns. And it's not that it's not fulfilling in a different way than if you just picked something where you're just collecting a paycheck. But I do believe there's a level of maturation and evolution that has to happen from that starting point, which is seeing how whatever is the thing that you think, okay, you have an interest in, or you're naturally gifted in, or whatever really speaks to you, how does that then connect with persons who have a need? You know what I mean? So I feel like there is that evolution that has to happen. So I'm glad that you spoke to that.
And that's where that creativity comes in, because there's a quote or a train of thought from Elon Musk that I loved ever since I heard it, was you are paid in direct proportion to the problem that you are solving. And that, when you apply that to anything that you're interested in, that will help you with your business. Because if you're solving a problem that nobody cares about, then best believe you're not really going to make money from that.
You're going to be poor. And if you are able to be happy being poor, then that's fine. You will be happy.
It could be a hobby. It could be a hobby to help you.
You will be happy.
And you do something else.
But we're not sure we would qualify it as a business.
Right. So when you figure out the problem that you're solving and you realize this is a big problem and you can help solve it for the big players in the space, then you are going to get paid accordingly to that. So I kind of use that as a compass as well to help me with what I do.
Yeah. And so talking again to persons who want to start up something and your interaction with people who are, because I think there are a lot of persons who now really want to create something for themselves business-wise and want to marry that. Not just, okay, I'm doing this because I feel like I have to slave at this job, but they really do want to imbue some of that, something inside of them that really speaks to whatever it is they're doing. But in your interactions, talking with people who want to start up businesses and all of that, what is something that you've observed that kind of keeps people back from pursuing whatever it is they want to pursue? And if there was something you could say to them to kind of help them get past it, what would you say?
One of the biggest things that holds people back specifically in Trinidad is they look at their space, doesn't matter what the space is, and they say to themselves, I can't do it, there's too many of other people doing it. But when you have a conversation with them, you realize that they're looking at people in a different market. So people will say, you know what, I don't want to start a bakery, or I don't want to start a food channel because there's too many food bloggers. And when you ask them, well, name your top 10 people, they name everybody in so many other countries. And then you're like, but you keep naming people in other markets. Like, why are you not thinking about your immediate market, which is Trinidad? Why aren't you thinking about what you could do here? We have a blue ocean here in Trinidad because there's not a lot of people doing a lot of the things that people think are happening. It might be happening in other countries, right? But don't focus on what's happening outside there. Focus on what's happening right in front of you. You can do it. Don't think that the space is saturated because you're following a million people who are in the States, who are in England. They're not in your market. They're not competing with you, right? Do it because you have blue ocean right here in the Caribbean.
Yeah. And that ties into one of the other questions I have, which is something that you mentioned in your blog, which is getting a micro niche. Yeah. And I want to talk about that because, again, from my own experience, I understand it, through myself, where you think, oh, I want to make a lot of money. How do I make a lot of money? Sell things to a lot of people. And again, that's part of that's part of the maturation, where you realize, okay, maybe eventually you might make a lot of money, but maybe progress onto that, starting with something that's a little bit more concentrated and defined. Yeah. So maybe you want to make $100 million in 5 years. I don't know, arbitrary figure. Yeah. But maybe you should start focusing on making $1 million, and maybe you only need to serve 1,000 people to make that first million. Right. And what is the thing that you would serve those 1,000 people? So kind of, it's because then when you get so disparate, you know, you can't really refine enough to create something that has a lot of depth, you know? So what would you say in terms of explaining what a micro niche is and how somebody can really narrow down their audience to make it speak to that?
So you made some good points, and I think here we have a lot of generalists. We have a lot of people who want to be good at a lot of different things. So they're never going deep in a topic, which if you're doing that, you can never create a micro niche. So you might say, you know what, I'm going to be a trainer. I want to be a fitness coach. I want to train people. And that's the field. And you want to train as much people as you want. That way you can make more money. Versus thinking about creating that micro niche that people probably are not playing in a space of, where you say, okay, you know what? Rather than just being a fitness coach, I want to be a fitness coach for male CEOs.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right?
That's a really good one.
Because now you're going deeper, and your messaging and what you put out there is going to make you think about what problems they're going to have and what you can solve for them. So we know that we have male CEOs, and as a CEO, one of your biggest problems is time. You don't have a lot of time to eat healthy. You don't have a lot of time to go and work out because you're always working or your schedule is very demanding. So if I can help solve them, you know, get healthy within a small amount of time, then you don't need 100 CEOs. You might only need 5 CEOs that pay you $50K a month. And guess what? They have the money. If they're making a ton of money, but they're not healthy, or they realize they're slowing down because of their health and it's not allowing them to be effective in their jobs, that's a problem you can solve. And like Elon Musk said, you are going to get paid in direct proportion to the problem you're solving, right? If you are going to solve $1 million problems, you are going to make $1 million. So figuring out that micro niche, when you think of whatever field you want to do, think about a specific group of people that you want to help. I'll give you another one. Let's just say you want to help women get healthy during pregnancy. If you dial it down even more, you could say, I want to help women that have diabetes get healthy during pregnancy. That way your messaging, the problems you're solving are going to be very specific to that group. And that's going to be a micro niche that not everybody is playing in, right? Not everybody is talking to women who have diabetes during pregnancy. And who do you think is going to be the go-to expert or the go-to source of information when diabetic women have that, right?
Yeah, I think that's really, again, it's about that maturation and really moving from the dream to reality, or kind of bridging that gap of dream and reality. Talking about entrepreneurship, staying on that topic, what are 3 books you would recommend for all entrepreneurs to read?
Man, if you are starting out as an entrepreneur, 3 books that are going to help you is 1, Gary Vaynerchuk, Crushing It. Read that book. He is the godfather of entrepreneurship, of new age entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship, online business, social media entrepreneurship. Reading that book will give you a great idea as to what is happening today and where your focus should be. We don't have the resources that people who built a business 10, 20 years ago did, right? Especially millennials who might not have the assets that the banks require to get off the ground. So Crushing It, Gary Vaynerchuk. The second book I recommend reading is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. I think after reading that book, you just view life very differently. You start questioning, your purchases. You start thinking about assets and liabilities and how do you create or purchased or invest in assets, and what can you do to minimize your liabilities and minimize your monthly expenses so that you can trek the long road of entrepreneurship. And the third book I recommend reading is Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. That book is like my Bible. He speaks specifically and gives so much practicality to digital entrepreneurship and how to thrive and survive in the digital age. You have to read that book. It's a must, because he gives you the blueprint of what to be doing right now. And those three, I'd start with those three.